Hello, my name is Ophalie. I wasn't supposed to be home that day, at least not without warning. But something in me said, go. What I found, my sister, locked in a shed behind her in-laws' house, in 104-degree heat, barely breathing. And the worst part? Everyone acted like it made sense, like she had done something wrong. But what if I told you? The shed wasn't the beginning, just the moment the truth stopped hiding. Why did her husband stay silent? Why did her mother-in-law smile when she saw the ambulance? And why does no one talk about what happened next? She wasn't sleeping. She was barely alive. That moment, frozen in my memory like a jagged photograph, was not how I had imagined spending my Saturday afternoon. I hadn't called ahead. That wasn't unusual between sisters, especially not for me. We had always been close, even if we lived in different parts of Houston. Sometimes I'd just show up with coffee and an old memory to laugh about. But today was different. The heat had pressed down on the neighborhood like a wet blanket, the kind that clings to your skin and makes your clothes feel like they're glued to your back. It was just past noon, and the digital dashboard in my car had flashed 104 degrees. I remembered thinking, no one should be outside in this. That thought would haunt me later. I pulled up to the curb of my sister's house, a modest two-story on a quiet cul-de-sac she shared with her husband and his mother. The front yard was manicured. Not overly polished, but neat. The SUV was in the driveway, which meant someone was home. But the windows were drawn, the house still. Not a curtain moved. I called Ophalie's phone. No answer. Not a voicemail either, just the long, dry ring and then silence. I tried again. Same. I figured maybe she was resting. Still, something didn't sit right. Ophalie was never one to miss my texts, even if it was just a heart emoji or a busy RN call you later. There was a hum in the air, not from the cicadas or the distant lawnmower, but something subtler, like a warning your gut sends before your brain catches up. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door. I knocked once, then twice. Nothing. I called her name through the door. Ophalie, it's me. You home? Still nothing. I walked around the side of the house, brushing past the crepe myrtles, which looked half wilted in the scorching sun. As I reached the back gate, I heard it, a sound so faint I thought at first it was my imagination. A tap, not sharp, not rhythmic, just desperate. Ophalie? I called again. The backyard was overgrown, wild even, which was odd because Ophalie loved her garden. She used to grow tomatoes and herbs and would send me pictures of basil bouquets and tiny cherry tomatoes in her palms. But now, the vines drooped, brown at the edges. The grass was dry and patchy, and in the far corner, behind an old grill and a few scattered tools, stood the shed. At first glance, it was just a regular garden shed, white with peeling paint and a sagging roof. But something was wrong. The door was shut tight. A rusty padlock dangled from the latch. That was the second thing that struck me as off. The first was the heat. It radiated from the shed like a furnace. Even standing a few feet away, I could feel it, a wall of air, suffocating and thick. Then I heard it again, a weak tap, followed by the faintest gasp. I stepped closer, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The sound wasn't coming from behind the shed or beside it. It was coming from inside. Ophalie? I said again, this time louder. Are you in there? Silence. I crouched down and peeked through a slim crack where the wood had warped. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, slumped against the wall, was a figure. Her figure. I saw a hand, limp, pale, the nails slightly dirty. I saw the side of her face, red from heat, sweat pouring down her temple. Her lips moved, but no words came out. I backed away. My chest tightened. I tried the padlock. It didn't budge. I ran to my car, grabbed the tire iron from the trunk, and raced back. One swing, then another. The rusted lock cracked open with a groan. I yanked the door open. The heat hit me like a slap. Inside smelled like metal, sweat, and something worse, stagnant air that had no right being breathed. Ophalie lay crumpled in the corner, her clothes soaked through, her hair matted to her forehead. I rushed to her, my voice cracking as I said her name over and over. Hey, it's me. Ophalie. It's Celine. Look at me. Come on. Her eyes fluttered. She tried to speak, but it came out as a rasp. I grabbed the half-empty water bottle beside her and tilted it gently to her lips. She winced. The plastic was hot, like it had been sitting in an oven. I poured some onto a towel from a nearby box and dabbed her face. "I'm gonna get you out of here," I said, my voice firmer now. She didn't answer. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. I pulled my phone from my back pocket and dialed 911. "My sister's been locked in a shed in 104-degree heat," I told the operator. "She's conscious, but barely. We need help, please." They asked for the address. I gave it. The dispatcher said help was on the way. Back inside the shed, Ophelie's eyes were open again. She whispered, barely audible, "Don't let her near him." "Who? Mom?" I asked. She shook her head. "Vera, her mother-in-law." I sat back on my heels, realization crashing over me like cold water. Vera, always polite, always perfectly dressed. The kind of woman who smiled through clenched teeth and said things like, "Well, if that's what works for your family," while silently judging every breath you took. But this was something else. I stayed with Ophelie until the paramedics arrived. I held her hand, wiped the sweat from her forehead, whispered that she was safe now. The EMTs asked questions. I answered them. I watched as they lifted her gently onto the stretcher. "She wasn't sleeping," I said to one of them, my voice trembling. "She was barely alive. She won't ever touch him again." That promise left my lips without hesitation, even before I fully understood what had happened, what had been allowed to happen, just feet away from the house where my sister slept every night, cooked meals, raised her child, and tried so hard to be the version of herself they would finally accept. But that version was gone now. Ophelie's eyes fluttered in and out, her skin still flushed a dangerous red, and her shirt clung to her like she'd just stepped out of a storm. Except it wasn't rain that soaked her. It was sweat, hours worth. I laid the damp towel gently across her neck again, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from screaming. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the cloth. I needed to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help her breathe any easier. The sirens in the distance grew louder. Relief and fury rose together in my chest. I'd always been the sister who stayed away from the drama. Mom used to say I chose peace over people. But that day, kneeling in a backyard shed with my sister barely able to hold a sip of water to her lips, peace was no longer an option. I had to choose Ophelie. The EMTs arrived within minutes. I flagged them down at the gate, waving with urgency I didn't try to hide. "In the back," I said, motioning toward the shed. "She's inside, barely conscious, locked in, outside temperatures 104. It must be worse in there." They moved with the efficiency of people who've done this too many times. As one knelt beside her, taking vitals, the other spoke calmly to me. "Do you know how long she's been in there?" "No," I answered honestly, "but the lock was on from the outside. She couldn't have gotten out." He frowned. "Was it broken when you got here?" "No," I said. "I broke it myself." The EMT nodded without saying more. They lifted Ophelie onto the gurney carefully, securing her with gentle precision. She whimpered when the sunlight hit her face again. That fragile sound cut deeper than I was ready for. I turned away as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. That's when I saw her. Vera. She stood at the edge of the back porch in her pristine blouse and sandals, holding a glass of lemonade, as if nothing had happened. Her expression was unreadable at first, too smooth, too practiced. Then she tilted her head and stepped forward. "What's going on back here?" she asked, her voice laced with feigned concern. "Is everything okay?" I stared at her, blinking once, deliberately. "Your daughter-in-law was locked in the shed. She nearly passed out from heat stroke." Vera's brows lifted just slightly. "Oh my goodness," she said, shaking her head slowly. "That's terrible. She must have gone in there herself. She gets these dizzy spells sometimes. Probably needed a quiet place." A quiet place. I took a step toward her. "You didn't hear her calling out." "You didn't think to check the yard? You were just inside this whole time?" She blinked, lips parting in mock surprise. I was napping. I didn't hear anything. I thought she'd gone to the store. Of course she did. Vera always had an answer, always kept the upper hand, so calm it bordered on chilling. I didn't respond. Instead, I reached into my back pocket, tapped my phone screen, and discreetly started recording. I broke the lock, I said again, louder this time, turning just enough so her voice would be captured. The padlock, the one keeping her inside. I see, she said, the faintest pause between her words. Well, maybe she forgot to tell someone she was resting in there. Resting. I stared at her, then glanced at the shed, the gurney, the sweat-stained floor, the damp towel I'd left behind. Maybe, I said, my tone flat. The paramedics emerged again. One of them said they were ready to transport Ophelie. Another asked who would be riding with her. Before I could answer, Vera stepped forward, placing her glass of lemonade on the patio table. I'll come, she said quickly. She'll want someone familiar with her. I moved before I could stop myself. No, you're not coming. Vera looked at me like I had just slapped her. She's my family, she said, blinking rapidly. She's my sister, I cut in. And she was locked inside your shed. Vera's lips pressed together. She didn't argue further, but the look she gave me, that glint of challenge, told me this wasn't over. I climbed into the ambulance before she could say another word. The doors closed behind me with a finality that felt like a line being drawn. Inside, Ophelie stirred. Her voice, dry and broken, was barely above a whisper. Don't let her near Micah. I won't, I said softly, gripping her hand. I promise. She won't ever touch him again. She closed her eyes. The ride to the hospital felt longer than it was. I sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall, counting each breath like it was a thread tying her back to us. When we arrived, they wheeled her inside quickly. I followed until a nurse gently stopped me, asking me to wait in the lobby. I gave them Ophelie's full name, spelled it twice, answered questions about medications, allergies, emergency contacts. I could feel the sweat cooling on my back, could hear the ringing of my phone in my purse. Vera, no doubt. I didn't answer. I sat down in the waiting room, arms crossed, jaw tight. That's when something clicked. I stood again, retraced my steps back to the shed in my mind. The rusted lock, the heat, the pillow and blanket in the corner, like a setup. Not just storage, not just coincidence. She'd been there before, and no one had done a damn thing. She's crossed too many. Celine didn't say anything after I whispered those words. She didn't need to. The way she looked at me, shoulders squared, jaw set, told me she understood exactly what I meant. The ambulance ride was a blur of voices and metal and too much fluorescent light. I drifted in and out, the pain in my head rising and falling like the tide. But through it all, Celine never left my side. When I finally opened my eyes for real, everything was still. The walls were white, the sheets stiff. Hospital. My lips were dry, throat raw. I turned my head, and there she was, Celine, sitting in the plastic chair next to me, scrolling through her phone with one hand, a cup of hospital coffee in the other. You're awake, she said quietly, like she didn't want to scare the moment away. I nodded, and the motion made my temples throb. I shouldn't have fainted. She blinked, set her cup down. You shouldn't have been in that shed. Her voice wasn't angry. It was steadier than I expected. That scared me more. I didn't mean for it to happen, I murmured. I know, she said, her expression softening. But this didn't come out of nowhere, did it? I looked away. No, it didn't. It started weeks ago, months if I'm honest. But one moment stuck with me like a splinter under the skin. It was 3 weeks before the ambulance, before the heat that nearly finished me. Vera had asked me to clean the shed. She said guests were coming the next day for some family brunch she hadn't told me about until last minute. Leland was working. Micah was at a friend's house. And I, as usual, had no reason to say no. The shed was disgusting. Dust, spider webs, mold in the corners. Shelves warped from years of neglect. I spent hours out there scrubbing, rearranging old tools and boxes. My shirt stuck to my back by noon. and sweat dripped from my chin onto the floor. Vera sat inside the kitchen with the AC humming, sipping iced tea through a straw. At one point, I walked in to grab more paper towels and saw her at the table with her church friend, Ruthie. "Oh, I didn't realize you were still out there," Vera said with a smile too sweet to be real. "You didn't tell me you were going to make it spotless." Ruthie laughed, and I laughed too. Because what else do you do? She didn't thank me, didn't ask if I needed water, just turned back to her conversation like I was the gardener she hired by the hour. That night, my back ached, my knees were sore, and Leland didn't even ask what I'd been doing all day. He just ate his dinner and watched TV while I rubbed balm on my hands and tried to keep my head down. But that moment, the shed and the iced tea and the smile she gave me in front of Ruthie, that was when something inside me shifted. I didn't say anything, not then. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that I was tired. That Vera was just Vera, but I kept seeing it, and then came the punishments, little ones at first, like when she forgot to make me a plate during Sunday dinner. Everyone else had full servings. Mine was scraps. "Oh, didn't you already eat?" she said, blinking like it was an honest mistake. Or the time she gave our old bedroom to Leland's cousin, just for a weekend. And I ended up on the couch for 5 nights. When I brought it up to Leland, he said, "It's just a room. It's not like she kicked you out." But she did. Over and over. She made me run errands during holidays, sent me to the store right before we were supposed to open gifts, asked me to sweep the patio during Micah's birthday party. There was always something to keep me away, to push me out of the frame, and I let it happen. I let it happen because I didn't want to make trouble, because I thought, if I stayed quiet, if I didn't complain, she'd ease up. Maybe she'd respect me more. One night, Micah came into my room after dinner. I was folding laundry. He climbed onto the bed and asked, "Why does Grandma not like you?" I dropped the shirt in my hands. "What makes you say that, baby?" "She doesn't hug you like she hugs me, or Daddy, and she always tells you to go somewhere." I didn't know what to say. How do you explain that kind of cruelty to a child? I told him, "Grandma loves people in different ways." He didn't seem convinced, neither was I. Back in the hospital room, Celine stood up and stretched. "I need to know something." I looked at her warily. "That shed," she said. "Has she locked you in there before?" I wanted to lie, to deflect, but my silence gave it away. Awfully. I swallowed hard. "Not like that, but she's sent me out there before, told me to reorganize it, told me I needed space to cool off, left me out there when guests came over. One time she said I made too much noise and that I should take a moment away from the house." Celine's face went rigid. "I didn't think it was that bad," I added, the words tumbling too fast now. "I mean, I thought, if I just kept doing what she asked, she'd stop?" Celine finished for me. I nodded. There was a long silence between us. Then she said, "She's crossed a line." I exhaled. "She's crossed too many." My voice didn't shake this time. It was steady, and it surprised even me. Celine didn't answer right away. She walked over to the window, looking out over the hospital parking lot like she was already planning the next step. When she turned back, her eyes were different, focused, ready. "She's going to try to make this go away," Celine said. "She'll play innocent. She'll twist the story. You know that, right?" I nodded. "She always does." Celine took out her phone and pulled up a video. "I started recording when she showed up at the shed," she said. "Got her on camera acting confused, saying you must have locked yourself in." She paused. "I know this isn't your style, but if you want out, for real, you need to fight." I stared at the screen for a long moment. The image of Vera's face, all smooth concern and fake surprise, made my stomach turn. I didn't know exactly what we were going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. We go smart. That was the last thing I told Celine before the nurse came in to check my blood pressure again. I could tell she wasn't sure what I meant by that, whether I had a specific plan in mind, or if it was just something I said to avoid crying. But I meant every word. After Celine stepped out to take a call, I sat in silence, staring at the IV line in my hand. The beeping machines around me made it hard to think. But one thing had become painfully clear. This wasn't just about me anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I heard voices outside my door, low, controlled. The kind of tone people use when they don't want the patient to hear the truth. I couldn't make out all the words, but I recognized the cadence, the fake concern. "She tends to overexert herself," someone said gently. "We've been trying to encourage her to take things slower. I told her the heat was too much." It was Vera. My stomach turned. "She gets dizzy sometimes," she continued. "I've warned her before. She just doesn't listen." I didn't move. I just let the words wash over me, one by one. She was setting the narrative, laying the groundwork, making me sound like the fragile one, the liability, the woman who wandered into a shed on a 104-degree day and forgot to come back inside. A nurse responded, her voice hesitant. "We'll note that in her file, ma'am." Of course they would. A moment later, Celine returned, her face tense. "You're not going to believe what she just said to the staff," she muttered, pulling up a chair again. "She's making it sound like you had a spell, like you locked yourself in there." I didn't respond right away. I was still trying to swallow the sting of hearing it with my own ears. "I should have known," I finally said. Celine's jaw clenched. "She knows exactly what she's doing. She's playing the long game." I sighed. "And I've been giving her the perfect character to play against. I've let her treat me like background noise." "Well," Celine said, her voice sharper now, "that's about to change." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "What's this?" I asked. "I printed a copy of the police report I filed when I found you," she said, "just so there's a record that someone outside her little circle saw what she did." I took the paper and stared at the text. There was something surreal about seeing it all laid out like that. Victim found unconscious in locked shed. High temperatures. Restricted airflow. Padlock removed by witness. My name. Her name. All in black and white. Then, as if the universe knew exactly how to turn the screws tighter, a knock came at the door. It opened just slightly, and in stepped Inez. I hadn't seen her since Micah's birthday 3 months ago. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired, like she'd aged 10 years. Still in her faded uniform, with the same gentle eyes. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly, stepping in and shutting the door behind her. I blinked. "Inez?" She nodded quickly, eyes darting toward the hallway. "They don't know I came. I had to tell you something." Celine stood protectively near the door, but I gestured for her to stay quiet. Inez walked closer, her hands wringing a paper towel she must have grabbed in the break room. "I heard them talking last week. Mrs. Corbin and her friend. I was cleaning the kitchen. She didn't know I was still there." I sat up straighter. "What did she say?" "She said," Inez hesitated. "She said, if we keep her looking unstable, she won't be able to fight for custody. Leland will see it eventually. He just needs time." Celine inhaled sharply. "She said that." "Exactly that?" Inez nodded, voice cracking. "I know I should have said something sooner, but I was scared. She's powerful in that house, and she watches everyone." I felt the room tilt slightly, not from the IV or the medication, but from the sheer weight of confirmation. It wasn't just emotional cruelty anymore. It was premeditated, strategic. "She's trying to take Micah," I said aloud, hearing the truth fully for the first time. Inez pulled something from her purse, a small flash drive. "I don't know if this helps, but I made a backup of the security footage from the last few weeks. The camera near the shed. She had Leland move it, but the file was still on the system before it reset." Celine's eyes widened. "You saved it?" Inez handed it over, her fingers shaking. "I don't want money. I don't want to get involved, but you deserve to know. And Micah, he deserves better." I held the drive in my hand, staring at it like it might burn a hole through my palm. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You don't know how much this means." Inez gave a small nod, turned, and slipped out the door as quickly as she came. For a while, no one said anything. Celine finally broke the silence. Well, she muttered, I guess we're going smarter than I thought. Later that evening, after the nurses had done their final rounds and Celine had left to pick up Micah from school, I sat alone in the dim hospital room, thinking about all the little ways Vera had chipped away at me, quietly, methodically, like the time she took over Micah's kindergarten orientation because I was too emotional, or the time she insisted on handling our refinance paperwork because I looked overwhelmed. At first, I chalked it up to meddling. That's what mothers-in-law do, right? But now it was obvious. She hadn't been helping. She'd been erasing me, bit by bit. I looked at the flash drive again and thought about the shed, the suffocating air, the taste of panic in my mouth, the way my hands had gone numb. Then I thought about Micah, about what it would mean if Vera ever succeeded. That's when the fear turned into something else. Resolve. When Celine returned with Micah and dinner from my favorite takeout spot, she smiled when she saw the expression on my face. What? She asked, handing me a fork. We go smart, I repeated, firmer now. She raised an eyebrow. Public or legal? I didn't even hesitate. Both. No. You did. The weight of those 3 words sat in the air like a held breath. I didn't shout them. I didn't need to. I spoke plainly, quietly, even, and in that stillness, I saw Vera's expression shift. Just slightly. A hairline crack in her otherwise unshakable calm. After that, I turned and walked back to the car where Celine waited, arms crossed, watching the exchange from a safe distance. I slid into the passenger seat, shut the door, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. You good? Celine finally asked, starting the engine. I nodded, but not because I felt good. I felt clear. That was enough for now. The next morning, we drove back to the house. The hospital discharged me just before noon. My vitals had stabilized. Dehydration treated. The official explanation was heat stroke. But between Celine, me, and the few paramedics who saw the lock on that shed, the truth was far messier. And now that I was standing in front of that house again, the house where I'd been silenced, sidelined, and nearly erased, I wasn't here to ask permission. I was here to pack my things and to give her one last chance. Celine stayed close, her phone half hidden in her palm, already recording, just in case. Leland opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes darted from me to Celine and back again. Hey, he muttered, stepping aside. I didn't respond. He didn't deserve small talk. We walked through the house without a word. The living room was still perfectly tidy. Vera's throw pillows were fluffed. The glass coffee table gleamed. It was the same house, but I didn't feel like I belonged to it anymore, and maybe I never did. I'll just grab the essentials, I said to no one in particular, heading upstairs. The bedroom door creaked as I opened it. Everything was in place, neat, cold. My suitcase was still in the closet where I'd left it, untouched. I pulled it out, opened drawers, and began methodically folding clothes. Celine stood in the doorway, watching. Want help? She asked. I shook my head. Let me do this myself. Downstairs, I could hear footsteps, Leland's maybe, and then her voice. Is she upstairs? Celine stepped aside as I zipped the suitcase. Time to go, I murmured. We carried everything down together. As we stepped into the entryway, Vera appeared, standing near the base of the stairs like a specter in her pressed linen shirt and pearl earrings. She had a way of always looking like she was on her way to church, even at home. You're feeling better, I hope, she said, smiling just enough to pass for polite. I placed the suitcase down and looked her square in the eye. I didn't come to catch up. I came to say something. Her smile faltered. Of course. This is the last time you'll ever see me in this house. Or Micah. Her brows lifted. Oh, Ophelie, don't be ridiculous. You're still unwell. I understand you're embarrassed, but this… Don't, I said sharply. Don't twist this. You know what you did. Vera took a step closer, arms crossed. You're acting like I'm the villain in some drama. You locked yourself in that shed. No one put you there. Celine stepped forward, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to argue, I said, my voice steady. I'm here to let you know what's going to happen next. Vera chuckled. You think I'm afraid of threats? I'm not threatening you, I replied. I'm informing you. She tilted her head. Of what, exactly? I've spoken with legal counsel. I've documented everything. We have video, audio, witness statements, emergency room records. I have enough to prove that you deliberately isolated me, attempted to portray me as unstable, and endangered my life. She blinked slowly, but her composure didn't crack. And what do you plan to do with all that? She asked. The next time you try to come near me or Micah, it'll be through a court-appointed channel. If you attempt contact, there will be consequences, legal ones. A long silence followed. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Vera smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. You're tearing this family apart. I took a breath. No, I said calmly, clearly. You did. I turned, picked up my suitcase, and walked out the front door. Celine followed. Neither of us looked back. We reached the driveway, the Texas sun beating down on us as if to remind me it hadn't forgotten what happened. My car sat parked in the same spot, unmoved. I hadn't driven it in over a week. The windshield was coated with dust, a thin film that blurred the glass like fog. Celine noticed it first. They never meant to let you leave, she said, her tone flat. I looked at the car, at the crusted lines on the hood where it hadn't been washed, hadn't been touched. I opened the trunk and placed my suitcase inside. Then I closed it and stood there, letting the moment settle. This wasn't just about a shed or an argument. This had been about control, ownership, about a woman who'd rather see me erased than see me become whole. Celine pulled out her keys. You riding with me? No, I said, unlocking the driver's side door. I'll drive myself. I need to. We pulled out of the driveway in tandem, like two halves of a whole moving in sync. I didn't cry. Not once. Not when I looked at the house in the rearview mirror, not when I merged onto the freeway, not when I turned into Celine's driveway 30 minutes later. Later that night, after Micah was asleep in the guest room, I sat at Celine's kitchen table while she made tea. What now? She asked. We wait, I said, but we stay ready. She nodded. She won't back down. I know, I said, but neither will I. She started it. I'm just making sure it ends. That thought played on a loop in my head all night. Even as I lay in Celine's guest room, eyes wide open, ceiling fan turning overhead, my body still sore from the dehydration, I couldn't rest. My body was recovering, but my spirit had caught fire. By morning, I had already made a list, handwritten on a notepad Celine kept near the kitchen phone. A list of everything I still needed to protect. Micah, my name, my future, my sanity. Celine handed me coffee, still in her bathrobe. She didn't ask how I slept. I got a text from Leland, she said instead, at 5 a.m. I paused mid-sip. What did it say? She picked up her phone, read aloud. Can we talk? Mom says you're poisoning everything. I scoffed and set the mug down harder than I meant to. She's wasting no time. She's shifting the narrative again, Celine said. Same old playbook. Of course she was. I knew Vera. If I'd only bruised her ego before, now I'd threatened her kingdom. She wouldn't go quietly. Within an hour, I received my own evidence of her next move. An email from Micah's school counselor. Subject line, concern regarding Micah Durant. The message was polite, neutral in tone, but it carried weight. I received a call from your mother-in-law expressing concern about your recent health episode. She mentioned that you may be experiencing some emotional distress and requested that we monitor Micah closely for any signs of instability at home. I'd like to schedule a meeting. I didn't finish reading. She's trying to erase me, I said aloud. Celine looked up. She's laying the groundwork. First the hospital, now the school. She wants to paint you as unstable. That way, if you take legal action, you'll look erratic, vengeful. It was brilliant in a twisted way. She was playing chess while I was still gathering the pieces, but not anymore. As I scrolled through old texts, looking for the number to Jasper Linville, the attorney Celine had worked with during her own divorce years ago, I saw a file tucked between the pages of my planner. It was old, folded, coffee-stained on one corner. I opened it absent-mindedly and froze. It was a letter. My handwriting. Written weeks ago. If something happens to me, don't let her raise Micah. My breath caught. It was the letter I never sent, the one I wrote after Vera accidentally forgot me at Micah's field trip pickup, leaving me stranded in 90-degree heat with no phone. The one I wrote after she changed the pharmacy pickup location without telling me and then told Leland I was forgetting things. The words were shaky. I had scribbled it after crying in the pantry so Micah wouldn't see. She's trying to make me look unfit. I don't know how far she'll go, but if anything happens, Celine, promise me you won't let her near him. He deserves safety. He deserves the truth. I covered my mouth. Celine walked into the room just then, pausing when she saw me holding the paper. What's that? I handed it to her. Her eyes scanned the page slowly. Then she looked at me. You meant this. I nodded. I still do. She didn't speak right away. Just folded the letter gently and tucked it into a file on the kitchen table. Let's call Jasper. Within hours, we were sitting in Jasper's small office across town. It smelled like old leather and dust. There were awards on the walls and a worn carpet beneath the conference table, but what mattered most was his voice. Measured, calm, surgical. I've handled cases like this, he said, after reviewing the flash drive from Inez and my medical records. But this one, it's cleaner than most. Cleaner? I asked. In the sense that it's well documented, he explained. And you're credible, which is more than half the battle. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. Emergency protection order, custody enforcement notice, financial authority revocation. Every page I signed felt like reclaiming another inch of my life. You understand what comes next? Jasper asked. She'll escalate, I replied. Yes, he said, but you'll be ready. That night, back at Celine's, I sat at the kitchen table as Micah worked on a drawing nearby. Celine brought over a folder of updated account details. She can't touch your finances now, she said. The bank's been notified. I nodded, flipping through the documents. Bank statements, password resets, contact logs. It felt oddly quiet after all the movement, like the eye of a storm. Micah looked up from his paper. Mom, when do we go home? I smiled gently. Soon, sweetheart. We're making a new one. He nodded like that answer made perfect sense. In his world, it probably did. Later that evening, I received a voicemail. Not a call, just the voice. Vera. You've started something you don't understand, she said. This family can't survive if you keep pushing like this. You're breaking everything. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I saved it, downloaded it, transcribed it, and added it to the folder Jasper gave me. Celine walked past and raised an eyebrow. She's still playing the victim? She asked. I nodded. Same script. She's betting you'll fold. She's betting wrong. She always wanted the final word. Now she has it, in legal print. I meant it as a quiet victory, but I also knew Vera wasn't the type to go down silently. And sure enough, by Sunday morning, she had found a stage. I woke up to a voicemail from Leland. She's hosting brunch today. Says it's just for family. No drama. You should come. For Micah. Keep the peace, Ophelie. Keep the peace. He said it like I had disrupted some holy balance, like locking me in a shed and calling me unstable was just a misunderstanding. I didn't reply, but I knew what I had to do. Let's go, I told Celine, who was pouring coffee into her travel mug. To her brunch? She asked, surprised. I nodded. If she wants an audience, we'll give her one. Celine raised an eyebrow. This isn't peacekeeping. No, I said. It's truth-telling. We dressed simply. Jeans, flats, no makeup. I brought my folder. Celine brought her recorder. We arrived just before noon. Vera's house looked like something out of a catalog. Fresh hydrangeas on the porch. A white tablecloth stretched across a buffet table in the backyard. Kids were playing on the grass, and adults mingled around mimosas and fruit salad. Vera stood near the patio, greeting people like a first lady at a campaign event. She spotted me and smiled like we hadn't seen each other in years. Ophelie, I didn't expect. How wonderful! I didn't return the smile. You invited everyone else. Leland was near the grill, avoiding eye contact. Of course, we found a spot near the edge of the crowd. Celine took out her phone and tucked it under her napkin. Recording. Just in case. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My wedding ring, or rather, the absence of it. It had vanished the day of the shed incident. I thought maybe I lost it in the ambulance or the hospital. But Vera's words earlier in the week replayed in my mind. She left the ring. She knows it's over. She'd taken it, used it, spun it into another story. Celine leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, eyes scanning the guests, faces I barely knew. Cousins of Leland's, old neighbors, church ladies with frozen smiles. I was about to speak when Micah came running up with a piece of paper in his hand. "Mom, I made something for you." He handed it to me with pride. It was a drawing. Crayon lines, rough but clear. A small building labeled shed. A stick figure inside. Another figure outside, holding a key. Micah pointed. "That's you." "That's Grandma." A hush fell around us. "What's this?" someone behind me asked. Micah answered without hesitation. "It's when Mommy got sick and Grandma said she'd be better in the quiet place." My breath caught. I looked up. Half the guests had gone still. Vera walked over, still smiling, but the cracks were starting to show. "What a vivid imagination," she said, reaching for the paper. "Kids say the wildest things, don't they?" Celine stepped forward before I could stop her. "Actually," she said, "kids remember what we try to bury." And then, calm as anything, she tapped her phone screen and hit play. Vera's voice filled the air. "You've started something you don't understand. This family can't survive if you keep pushing like this. You're breaking everything." Gasps. A fork clattered against a plate. A few people turned away, pretending to sip their drinks. One of Leland's aunts crossed her arms. Vera's eyes narrowed. "You recorded me?" "No," I said. "You recorded yourself. With every lie, every manipulation, every moment you tried to erase me." Leland finally walked over, his expression a mask of panic. "Maybe we should talk about this, privately." I turned to him. "You wanted me to come. You said keep the peace. Well, here I am. Keeping it real." Vera's voice rose a pitch. "You think you're some kind of martyr now? You were always fragile, always dramatic. I tried to protect Micah from that." "That's why you locked me in a shed?" I asked. Someone gasped, the sound of a chair scraping back. "I never," Vera began. "Yes, you did," I cut in. "You locked the door. You told people I needed quiet. You called the school to say I was unstable. You took my wedding ring and told people I abandoned my family." The silence that followed was worse than yelling. Then, from the side gate, Jasper walked in. He held a manila envelope. "Vera Corbin?" She blinked. "Who?" "I'm here on behalf of Ophelie Durant," he said, pulling a document from the envelope. "This is a cease and desist order. Further contact will be considered harassment under Texas law." A woman nearby muttered, "Oh my." Vera stepped back, her face paling. "This is absurd," she hissed. "This is accountability," I replied. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Micah tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go now?" I looked down at him and smiled gently. "Yes, baby, we're done here." We walked out together, me, my son, my sister, and my lawyer. Behind us, the crowd started whispering. No one followed. She always wanted the final word. Now she has it, in legal print. And just like that, the woman who tried to erase me disappeared without a sound. But before she left, she tried to burn every bridge on her way out. The morning after the brunch, Celine and I sat across from Jasper at his office. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds, striping the conference table. He looked calm, collected, exactly what I needed him to be. "We're moving to deposition," he said, laying out a stack of paperwork. "Formal statements under oath, prep for court if needed, but this won't stay behind closed doors much longer." I nodded. My palms were damp, but my heart was steady. "She'll deny everything," Celine said, flipping through a copy of the documents. She'll play the victim card all the way to the finish. That's fine, Jasper replied. We're not working off emotion, we're working off evidence. That was where the folder came in, the one I found tucked deep inside the drawer of Vera's home office back when I still lived there. I had thought it was just old junk at first, papers, receipts, to-do lists. But then I found them, two neatly printed legal documents. One was a draft of a custody transfer form. My name was typed, but not signed. The second was worse, a forged declaration, supposedly written by me, stating I was voluntarily stepping away from parenting duties due to emotional instability. Celine took photos. I kept copies. She was building her story in advance, I said. Jasper scanned them carefully. And now she won't get to finish it. The next step was confrontation. Not a shouting match, not an emotional appeal, a controlled gathering backed by legal weight. Jasper recommended we do it at Vera's house, while the memory of the brunch was still fresh in everyone's minds. Her circle saw what happened, he said. This will be the second nail. So we did. 2 days later, Celine drove me to the house I once called home. It was early evening. The air hung thick, heavy. My palms pressed against my thighs the whole ride there, heart thudding against my ribs. Leland was already waiting inside when we arrived. He stood in the kitchen with his arms folded, looking like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. A few of his relatives were seated in the living room, people who had watched me carry birthday cakes and clean up after family dinners for years, who now shifted uncomfortably in their seats when I entered. Then Vera appeared. She was dressed perfectly, as always. Hair smooth, jewelry subtle, voice poised. "You're making a mistake," she said as I stepped inside. "No," I answered. "I'm correcting one." Jasper followed, his briefcase in hand, and wasted no time. He placed a folder on the coffee table and began outlining the sequence of evidence. The flash drive from Inez, the voicemail, the hospital records, and now, the forged documents. Vera's eyes narrowed. "I never signed anything." "No," I said. "You just printed them and hoped I would." Leland stared at the papers, color draining from his face. "You did this?" She didn't answer right away. Then, like a switch, she turned to him and snapped, "You know what she's like. She cries over spilled coffee. You think she can raise a child alone?" The room went quiet. Jasper remained calm. "We're not here to debate her personality. We're here to address actions that endangered her safety and her legal rights." Celine reached into her bag and pulled out Micah's drawing, the same one from the brunch. She held it up without a word. Vera's lips pressed into a line. That's when Leland spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like glass. "You almost killed my wife." Vera turned, stunned. He continued, "You lied to me. You lied about everything, and I let you. But I'm done." She stepped back, her hands trembling. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking my son's side," he said. "You're not welcome in my house again." The words landed like a gavel. For a moment, Vera looked like a woman who'd been slapped, eyes wide, mouth open. Then she cracked. "You're all so naive," she spat. "She's manipulating you, just like she always does." She turned to me. "You think you've won? You think you're strong? You'll fold again. You always do. You're weak." I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I was weak when I kept hoping you'd love me back. That version of me is gone." She looked around. No one came to her defense. Not Leland, not the aunts, not even Ruthie, her closest friend, who quietly gathered her purse and walked toward the door. Vera stood in the center of the room, the queen without a court, hands trembling as she tried to reclaim her dignity. She turned to Jasper. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Jasper smiled faintly. "I look forward to it." Then she left the room, heels clicking against the tile floor, back stiff. The rest of us stayed seated, like the air had been sucked from the house. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. 3 days later, Vera packed her things and moved out of state. No announcement, no dramatic goodbye, just a U-Haul in silence. Leland didn't go with her. He stayed with Micah and me during the transition, unsure of his place in our lives, but no longer tethered to hers. The final legal documents arrived by courier the following week. Full custody retained, restraining order granted, financial access revoked. I stood at Celine's window, watching Micah play in the yard. The sun dipped lower on the horizon. My hands still bore the scars from months of pretending I was okay, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I didn't watch the moving truck leave. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. And just like that, the woman who tried to erase me disappeared without a sound. There was no phone call, no note, no long-winded apology or attempt to rewrite the ending. One morning, about a month after the cease and desist, a neighbor texted Celine that a moving truck had been parked outside Vera's house. A few hours later, she was gone. I didn't feel triumphant, just quiet. We had signed the final legal documents earlier that week. Full custody of Micah was granted to me, with all parental rights reaffirmed and protected. The restraining order was active. Financial access had been frozen. My attorney called it clean. I called it overdue. By then, Micah and I had already moved into a small two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen cabinets squeaked when opened too quickly. The floorboards in the hallway creaked under certain steps. Most of our furniture was either thrifted or donated by Celine's friends, but it was ours, and it was quiet in a different way, peaceful. I painted Micah's room pale blue. He picked out star decals and stuck them to the ceiling. Every night he pointed at them one by one, naming each as if they were old friends. That's for Grandma Karen. That one's for my turtle that died. That one's for Auntie Celine. There were days the exhaustion caught up to me, physical and emotional. I didn't bounce back like I used to, but I also didn't wake up every morning with a pit in my stomach. I didn't walk on eggshells in my own kitchen. I could open my fridge without seeing food labeled for someone else. I could breathe. Celine visited often. She brought over groceries, books for Micah, a toolbox I never knew how much I'd need. One afternoon while folding laundry, she sat beside me and said, "You look like yourself again." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I'd found that version of me yet, but I knew I was closer. Then came the update I didn't ask for but somehow needed. "She lost 3 clients," Celine said, referring to Vera's consulting work with small businesses. Apparently word got around. I didn't ask who told them. I didn't have to. "She moved to Oklahoma," she added. "Small town outside Tulsa. Starting over, I guess." I nodded. "Some people still believe her?" "Sure," Celine shrugged. "There's always someone who wants the story that makes them feel more comfortable." I didn't respond. There was no gloating in me, no need for vengeance, just a hollow kind of justice. Later that week, while taping up Micah's latest artwork on the fridge, I found one drawing tucked under a magnet shaped like a strawberry. I hadn't seen him work on this one. It had been slipped in quietly. 3 stick figures stood under a bright yellow sun, one tall with curly hair, one medium with a ponytail, one small with a baseball cap. All were smiling, holding hands. Above them, in red crayon, was written, "This is our real home." I stared at it for a long time. My throat tightened. Micah wandered into the kitchen, looking for a snack. I showed him the drawing. "You made this?" He nodded. "That's you. That's Auntie Celine. That's me. We're happy now." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I knelt down, hugged him close, and didn't say a word. That night, after putting him to bed, I sat on the couch with an old leather-bound journal in my lap. It had been a gift from Leland, years ago, back when things felt simpler. I flipped through the pages, skimming old grocery lists, therapy notes, quotes I had scribbled down during sleepless nights. On the very last page, I found a letter, dated almost a year ago, unsent. "Dear Vera, you won't understand what you took from me, but I do. You took my voice, my presence, my place in my own story, and for a long time I let you. But I'm healing it now. Not to hurt you, not to change you, but because I deserve to live fully, and so does my son." I folded the journal closed. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I walked it to the kitchen trash can and dropped it in. Some stories didn't need to be sent. Some chapters were better left closed. The next morning, I woke early. The sun hadn't fully risen, but a soft glow lit the kitchen. I poured a cup of coffee, stepped onto the porch, and sat down with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Celine pulled up 10 minutes later, with her own cup in hand. "Thought you'd be awake," she said, handing me a pastry in a paper bag. We didn't talk much, just sat there, watching the world wake up, the air cool and still. Inside, Micah stirred. I could hear him talking to himself in his room, reciting the names of his star stickers again. I sipped my coffee and stared out at the street. The scars are still there, some will never fully fade. But I'm here, and I'm free. Freedom doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it somewhere to rest. Sometimes the deepest wounds aren't visible, and the loudest cries come in silence. Ophelie's story isn't just about survival. It's about reclaiming your voice when others try to erase it, about drawing a line and saying, "No more." So what about you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Or watched someone else slowly disappear behind a smile? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more true life stories that hit close to home.